not suffer and die to give me an education to slight, oppress, or discourage my people. Because whatsoever education I acquired out of their sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say there shall be no more life for you. I unequivocally rejected the racist assumption of much white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior and that he had intended Negroes to be a servant class, used as wood and bowls of water. Well, I predicated my group of man on the doctrine of Imago Dei. All men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. Now, from this premise follow the equality of all men and the brotherhood of all men. The biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that he created of one blood all nations of men that dwell on the face of the earth. I was most interested in brotherhood within his own race, because if Negroes are created in God's image and Negroes are black, then God must in some sense be black. If the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. We have found a new ideal, because God has no power, and yet it is human to see everything through one's own spectacles. And since the white people have seen their God through their white spectacles, we have only now started to see our God through our own spectacles. But we believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, God of Father, God of Son, God of Holy Ghost, the one God of all ages. That is the God in whom we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. For 250 years, we have struggled under the burden and rigors of slavery. We were maimed, we were brutalized, we were ravaged in every way. We are men. We have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires just like any other race. The cry is raised all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, of America for the Americans, of England for the English, of France for the French, of Germany for the Germans. Do you think it unreasonable that we, the blacks of the world, should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans? The Negro is the man. We represent the new Negro. His back is not yet against the wall. We do not want his back against the wall because that would be a peculiar and desperate position. We do not want him there. It is because of this that we are asking for fair compromise. When the Belgians have control of the Belgian Congo, which they cannot use, they have not the resources to develop nor the intelligence. The French have more territory than they can develop. There are certain parts of Africa in which they cannot live at all. So it is for you to come together and give us a United States of Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are not going to be a race without a country. God never intended it, and we are not going to abuse God's confidence in us as men. We are men, human beings, capable of the same acts as any other race, possessing under fair circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping. Today Africa's walking around not only on her feet, but on her brains. You can enslave us with them for 300 years, the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men. You can shackle the feet of men. You can imprison the bodies of men, but you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men. Lie down, black men, and dig. Reach up, black men and women, and pull all nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything, north and south, east and west. And then when you have wrought well, you will have merited God's blessing, you will have become God's chosen people, and naturally you will become leaders of the world. And if you bow down to the white man today, so a lot of races bow down to you and call you a race of masters because of the superiority of your mind and your achievements. Because no race has the last word on culture and civilization. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know what we are thinking. They're thinking in terms of dreadnoughts, battleships, aeroplanes, submarines. You know what we're thinking about? That is our own private business. So give us credit for being able to use our minds. And when people becoming conscious of themselves, determined to use their minds, you do not know to what extent it can go. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. We love the white race, not for social fellowship, but for the common brotherhood of God until we should live. What satisfaction can anyone get in being happy and see his brother wallowing in filth, dirt, and disease? How can you be happy living in luxury and your brother's living in disease? And then when you try to help the one out of the disease, the public culture talks about disloyalty. Black men of Carthage, black men of Ethiopia, Timbuktu, Alexandria gave the light of civilization to this world. Ethiopians shall stretch forth our hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt. The classes, nations, races have been quite for over 4 centuries. who was merely born abuse, insult, humiliation, whose forbearance can only be compared to the prophet Job, as likewise lifted his bowed head and raised it up to God's skies and cried out, I am a man, and demand a man's chance and a man's treatment in this world. But I shall teach the black man, I shall teach the black man to see beauty in his own kind and stop bleaching his skin and otherwise looking like what he's not. Back in the days of slavery, race miscegenation and occurred because the African woman had no protection from the slave master. Therefore, there is no need today for black people to themselves freely continue a practice that smacks them as a slavery. Our brothers said the race problem will be solved through higher education, through better education, and black and white will come together, that they will never happen until Africa is redeemed. Because if those who like WEB the war believe that the race problem will be solved in America through higher education, they will walk between now and eternity and never see the problem solved. God made man Lord of his creation, gave him possession and ownership of the world. And you have been so darned deity that you have allowed the other fellow to run away with the whole world, and now he's stopping you and telling you that the world belongs to him and that you have no part in it. How you have to apologize to anybody for being black? Because God Almighty knew exactly what he was doing when he made me black. If black people knew their glorious past, then they would be more inclined to respect themselves. Yes, you heard the Johnny Walker red and black. Well, he had his adversity, but he's still going strong. Well, I intend with your help, God's grace to continue, because my work will be just begun. When future generations shall have in their hands the guide by which they shall know the things of the 20th century. I know, and I know you too believe in time, but we shall wait patiently for 200 years if need be to face our enemies through our prosperity. When my enemies are satisfied, in life I shall come back, or in death even to serve you as I served before. In life I shall be the same, in death I shall be a then it comes on me to be the real Marcus Garvey I would like to be. If I may come in an earthquake or a plague or a pestilence or a God will help me, then be assured that I shall never desert you and make your enemies triumph over you. Will I not go to hell 1,000,000 times for you? If I die in Atlanta, my work will only just then begin. For I shall live in the physical or the spiritual to see the day of Africa's glory. When I am dead, wrap the mantle of the red, the black and the green around me, for in the new life I shall rise up with God's strength and blessings to lead the millions of the heights and the triumph that you well know. Look for me in a whirlwind or a storm, look for me all around you, for with God's grace I shall come back with countless millions of black men and women who have died in America, those who have died in the West Indies, and those who have died in Africa, to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. They gave leadership to our foreparents, and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men. Our great scholars have embarked through the colleges and universities have thrown away the blessed record. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. France under Napoleon did it. Germany under Prince von Bismarck did it. England under America under George Washington did it. Africa with 400 million black people can do it. If you cannot do it, if you are not prepared to do it, then you will die. You race of cowards. You race of imbeciles, you race of good for nothing. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you have better die. Can we do it? We can do it. We shall do it. We pray to God for vision and for leadership. And He is giving us a universal vision. A vision that will not limit our possibilities to America. A vision that will not limit our possibilities to the West Indies, but a vision that said it must be a free and redeemed Africa. Christ the crucified, Christ the despised. We appeal to you for help, for succor, for leadership. When you endeavor to carry your burden up the heights of Calvary, when white men scorn you, when white men scorn you, when white men spat upon you, when white men pierced your side out with blood and water gush forth, it was a black man in the name of Simon the Syrian who took your cross and bore it up the heights of Calvary. And now that we are bearing our burden of being so heavy, we just ask that you just help us on up the heights. Oh yes, the cause is grand, the cause is good. Surely we shall not turn back. Oh, sail on, sail on, sail on, almighty shepherd, sail on until the flag of the red, the black and the green is first upon the hills of the Africa. Because the time has come for the black man to forget his hero worship of other races and to create an image heroes of his own. We must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate positions of fame and honor, black men and women who have made a distinct contribution to our racial history. Sojourner Truth is wearing our place of sainthood alongside the Son of Mark. Christmas Harris and George William Gordon are entitled to the halo of martyrdom with no less glory than the martyrs of any other race. To supplement our stringency of a soldier or a statesman outside of any other people, and be entitled to the highest place as a hero among men. Because Africa created millions and countless millions of black men and women in war and peace, whose luster and bravery outshine that of any other people. So why not see good and perfection in ourselves? We must inspire our literature and promulgate the doctrine of our own without any apologies to the powers that be. That right is all from God. Let's implement the possibility go to the winds. We are entitled to our own opinion and are not obligated to abound by the opinions of others. If others laugh at you, return the laughter to them. If they make you, return the compliment with full force. Because they have no right to dishonor, discredit you in manner that you have been dealing with them. Honor them when they honor you. Disrespect and disregard when they fight treat you. Their arrogance is but skin deep, an assumption that has no foundation in morals or in law. They are from the same family view of obscurity as we have. Their histories is rooted in primitiveness as ours. Their ancestors were running wild in living in trees or branches like monkeys as ours. They made human sacrifices, ate the flesh of their own dead, and wild meat from beasts for centuries, even as they have accused us of doing. Their cannibalism is more prolonged than ours. When we were embracing the banks of the Nile, they were still drinking blood out of the skulls of their conquered dead. After our civilization had reached the noonday of progress, they were still living in holes with bats, rats, and other insects and animals. After we had already unfathom the mystery of the stars and reduced the heavenly constellations to minute and regular calculus, they were still backwards men living in ignorance and in blatant darkness. The world is indebted to us for the benefits of civilization. They stole our arts and sciences from Africa. Then why should we be ashamed of ourselves? Their modern improvement to be reflected and resurrected by our generation and our posterity. Why should we be discouraged if somebody laughs at us today? Who's to tell what tomorrow will bring forth? They did not laugh at Christ, Moses, Muhammad. Was there not a carpet, priest, and roll? So we see and have changes every day. So pray, work, be steadfast, and be not dismayed. Because as the Jew is held together by his religion, the white race is by the assumption and the unwritten law of superiority, the Mongolian by the precious tie of blood. Likewise, the black man must unite in one grand racial hierarchy. Our union must know no clan, no nationality, but let us all hold together in every country and every clime, making a racial empire upon which the sun shall never set. Let no voice but your own speak to you from the depths. Let no influence but your own rouse you in time of peace and time of war. Hear all, but attend only to that which concerns you. Your allegiance shall be to your God, your race, your country. Remember that the Jew in his political and economic origins always was the Jew. The white man is first a white man under all circumstances, so you can do no less. Be black, buy black, think black, and all else will take care of itself. Let no one inoculate you with evil doctrines to suit its own convenience. Charity begins at home. So first to thyself be true, and thou canst not then depart to no man. Because God and nature first made us what we are. And out of our own creative genius, we make ourselves what we want to be. Follow on with that great law. Let God in the sky be our limit and eternity our measure. There is no height to which you cannot climb without the active intelligence of your own mind. Mind creates, and as much as we desire in nature, we can have through the creation of our own minds. And today, being scientifically the weaker race, you shall speak out as only as they teach it. But in your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher development of science to your children. And make sure that we have a race of scientists all right to us. For in religion and science lies our only hope to withstand the evil design of modern materialism. Never forget your God. Remember that we live, work, and pray for a binding racial hierarchy, whose only natural, spiritual, and political limits shall be God and Africa at home and abroad. With God's dearest blessings, I leave you for a while. One love. Brothers and sisters, Marcus, Mosiah, Bobby.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings, and welcome. I hope everyone's good, and I hope everyone can hear me. So just give me a confirmation if you can hear me loud and clear. You know what I'm saying? I just want to give me a signal in the chat. We want to open by saying Tendai Mwari. Be thankful unto the Most High Mother, Father, Creator of the universe. Kuzai Muzimu Mokuru. Give praises unto our great ancestors. Ankh Uja Seneb. We greet you with life, prosperity, and health, as spoken in the ancient language of our KIMOYO ancestors, Hotep, Rastafari, African power for all African people. Once again, family, just want to know that everybody can hear me. So just give me a signal in the chat. Give me a little signal, you know what I mean? So, you know, I'm assured that I can be heard clearly. Let me go into a bit of an explanation now as to why we are playing that on this day. You just heard the voice of a brother called Ron Bob Semple, who is channeling the spirit of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And I am playing this because today is in fact the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of the passing of the man who we in the Al-Qaeda revivalist movement refer to as the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And believe it or not, I knew this day was that day, and I knew I would present in this presentation on this day, but I didn't. It only really was as I was preparing to sit down and deliver the presentation, the significance of the subject today, and the fact that this is this day, only really kind of came into my conscious mind about an hour ago. And the reason for that is the reason why it's so significant, should I say, is because today's subject is ancestors and the forces of nature. Ancestors and the forces of nature. The 10th of June 1940, Papa Garvey began his ascension to the ancestral realm. And you just heard a rendition of a speech that he delivered. And why I say that Ron Bob Semple is channeling the spirit of Marcus Mosiah Garvey is because this goes beyond acting, in the sense of the fact that, and he will say this himself, but there are those who heard this speech and who had heard Papa Garvey speak before, and they swore blind it was a long lost recording. And it just so happened that it was Brother Rob Simple, but he sounds that much like Marcus Garvey that those who knew him, thought this was actually just him. Okay, and so we understand how spirit moving it like that. Yeah, there's something else going on there. All right, because nobody sounds that much like a man in it. Right. However, this day, the 10th of June, 1940, is when Papa Garvey ascended, began to make his ascension. And so I'm here wearing my red, black, and green sash, yeah? And every Messiah, the month of August, we call Messiah, we wear this sash every day because of the fact that Marcus Messiah Garvey himself said, when I die, wrap me in the mantle of the red, the black, and the green, for in a new life I shall rise. In the speech that you just heard, the statement is made, look for me in a whirlwind or a storm. Yeah, look for me all around you. For with God's grace, I shall come back with countless millions of black men and women. Yeah, etc., etc., etc. And so think about this idea of looking for me in a whirlwind or a storm. Yeah, this is the day that Marcus Messiah Garvey became an ancestor. Okay, and the subject is ancestors and the forces of nature. Yeah, literally an hour ago, I'm meditating on this thing. I'm thinking, rah, like, yo, yeah, something going yasa. Yeah. So it is an honor and a pleasure to have you joining me on this day. I'm taking all of that as a sign that you know, this is the right place to be for me right about now, and I do give thanks. So can hear, but the quality is not as good as yesterday. Okay, I'm not sure why that is. Let me see if I can negotiate some movements, right? Oh, maybe because I'm using a different mic. Yeah, so let me know. Keep me in tune, kings and queens. Keep me in tune. Keep me in tune. I just want to make sure that the quality is good. So if it's improving or if it's even too loud at any point, then just let me know. I'm gonna do a little sound check myself. Yeah, you know, but thank you for that, brother IC3, for that little quality control. All right, if everybody can hear me, I'm gonna continue. Yeah. So it sounds like I can be heard. Right, family. Before I go in, let me just say that if you check out the for those who were asking and have been asking how they can support the thing, there's a PayPal link in the chat for anybody who wants to make a contribution for the works that I produce and present through this series. Feel free to make use of it, but please do not feel obliged. And yeah, I thank you all for whatever contributions do come through. So today we're going to get into the presentation, which is Ancestors and the Forces of Nature. Ancestors and the Forces of Nature. All right. Bear with me whilst I share up the screen, reshare the screen, and we'll get into this right about now. Okay. Hide that. Share the link, family. Share the link far and wide. Share the link out there. Yard and foreign kick up. Yeah. Share it out. And like up the video as well as you come through. Okay. Now, I'm going to really be condensing a lot of stuff into a small kind of frame because really these two aspects of the thing could be presentations in and of themselves, but I hope ones and ones get something from it. Okay, 1 second. Let me see if I can work with a science around here. I'm sounding kind of muffled apparently. All right. Let me know if this sounds better. Sorry, family. This is the hazard when you're working with tight clip mic certain time. You know what I mean? These things can go on. I just saw it go. But yeah, keep me in tune. I am watching the chat. Okay, so we're gonna go in. So we're dealing with the forces of nature first and foremost, and then we're going to get into ancestors. Some of what I'm dealing with today is going to relate heavily to what's going to be touched on next week, which is the self. Forgot the title now. The self ritual and nationhood. The self, ritual, and nationhood. Now, obviously, we cannot deal with the forces of nature and ancestors without dealing with ritual. So I'm going to touch on some things, but we're going to really properly, you know, go into some stuff in terms of ritual next week. And Caleb, I see you have a question. You can ask your question when I'm finished the presentation, and I will most certainly answer it. Right, there's echo now. Okay, 1 second. I think I know why that is. Sound quality echo now. Okay, so let me know if there's still echo. I don't know why. Like this whole time I've been running with the same setup. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna go forward and I'm gonna keep looking at the chat. Thank you for keeping me in tune, kings and queens. But yeah, I'm not sure why there are issues with the sound. Anyway, let's go forward. Right. I'm reiterating that this series is dedicated to my auntie Nkechi Ode, who recently passed away in March. And we buried her last month. And I also want to give thanks to her for all of the encouragement that she gave me for work such as these. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Invaluable, you know, moral support. And she's sorely missed. She's also one of the sole parents to my son, who she poured a lot of love on. And so because of her works and her encouragement for me in these works, I want to dedicate this series to Auntie Nkechi. All right, so love to Auntie Nkechi, and this is very pertinent because she is also now an ancestor, so I call on her spirit for guidance as I continue to deliver this presentation and this series. Okay, I've been beginning with this excerpt from a speech by Mama Marimba Ani recently, and so I'm going to continue in that vein now. Yeah, this is just to explain and give purpose to why we do things like these. Okay, all right, so I hope ones and ones can hear this.
African spiritual thought in its own terms. Okay,
sorry, before I even go into that, I should actually make reference to the fact that this is an occasion in 2014 where we were celebrating the centenary of the UNIA ACL, the organization that Papa Garvey was the leader of. Yeah, and so Auntie Nkechi actually chaired the event. I delivered the keynote at that event, and you know, she poured a lot of love and encouragement on me on that day. But she's also holding in her hand a book entitled Women of the Garvey Movement by Queen Mother Nzinga Asata, a warrior, activist, elder from, living on these shores. And so I just wanted to point that out because of the significance of today also. We're going to go forward into Mama Marimba Ani. All right?
African spiritual thought in its own terms. Okay. Many of us are practicing other religions because we need something. That's a human need. That's an African need. And we're doing this because no one has ever presented African religion to us in terms of the underlying philosophy that the religion is based on. That is, no coherent statement has been made to us about African religion, and it hasn't been explained in terms of the African worldview. Usually it's explained in reference to somebody else's worldview. So I want to attempt to correct that this evening, and then we can get hopefully into questions.
So the point is, family, is that today and for the duration of this series, we are trying to put African spirituality in its proper context using the philosophical thought, or as Baba Jedi Shemsu Jehuti, also known as Jacob Carothers, would say, the high culture and deep thought of African civilization and the development of African people. Generally speaking, the view of African spirituality that we hold today is not derived from African, the perspective of African people, and is also full of impositions from other cultures. and it wouldn't be so bad, except for the fact that for the most part, these other cultures have expressly been oppressive and degrading to African cultures and spirituality. And so when we begin to adopt their view of our ancestors and our original culture, we begin to become enemies of ourselves. We begin to degrade ourselves, yeah? And in particular, the primary victims of that degradation are, in fact, our ancestors. And I'll go into the reasons why that is the case a little bit later on. So we've put the presentation into perspective. I want to start by kind of drawing from where we were last week, yeah, which was in terms of looking at definitions and understandings of the creator, okay? And this is taken from a book. The elder that you see in the background is Baba Aikwe Ama, and he is the author of a number of novels and memoirs, yeah? Probably the most famous of which is 2000 Seasons, yeah? It's one of the most brilliant books I've read. To say it's a novel is to do an injustice to actually what this is. It's almost like a spiritual text, yeah? And I won't go into an explanation of what the book is about, except to say just get it, yeah, and read it. But in the first chapter, yeah, he engages in a kind of a prose, yeah, in terms of how old we are, and he sets it out in a very, very beautiful way, okay? But he includes this piece of wisdom. He says, what we do not know, we do not claim to know. Who made the earth and when? We have no need to claim to know. Many thoughts growing with every generation have come down to us, many wonderings. The best have left us thinking it is not necessary for the earth to have been created by any imagined being. We have thought it better to start from sure knowledge, call fables fables, and wait till clarity. Yeah, and so this is an explanation. This is an elder who was born of an Ewe father and an Akan mother. Yeah, and so he is very in tune, has studied his people's culture and especially their literary traditions. Okay, so he knows much about those traditions, and he's basically saying to us that we don't have a thing in our cultures whereby we must claim to have an absolute knowledge or been given an absolute knowledge of the creator. Yeah, we start from sure knowledge. Yeah, and the surest of knowledge comes from studying the creation itself, nature itself, and we draw from that, and from that we glean our understandings about the creation and therefore the creator. Yeah, and so we don't need to create nothing. We call fables fables, and fables have their place within a culture, but we don't have to treat fables as though they're history and literal. Okay, and so I thought that was a good way to start off this particular presentation. Again, continuing to draw from where we were last week, yeah, in the teachings that was given to I in the Al-Qaeda Revivalist movement. Mwali, yeah, defining the creator, is the totality of the universe manifested in all that is. The nature of Mwali is therefore called, and Mwali in Shona, in the Shona language most spoken in Zimbabwe, is the creator. Okay, the nature of Mwali is therefore coded and manifested in the universe itself. That is to say, in the laws of nature. Thus, nature is the manifest character and will of Mwali. Since nature is the manifest character of Mwali, harmonizing with the laws of nature is submission or obedience to the will of Mwali. Thus, we imbibe the attributes of Mwali and strive to accomplish, the divine purpose of being. Now, what is the divine purpose of being? Tune in next week where we will go into the divine purpose of being, kings and queens. Okay, so we have these forces of nature which are exemplified and made manifest in various different pantheons, or let's say communities of deities, communities of spirits, yeah, within various African traditions. I've just given what, 10 here. There are many, many more. Okay, I dropped off. Oh, you dropped off. I'm about to say, when you say dropped off, you have to be careful how you say dropped off. You get me in these times, brother Emily. Right. Okay. Blessings, family, and good to have you here. All right. So in ancient Kemet, you have the Neteru. Yes. Probably the most popular or well known because of the extent of its codification and its proliferation in the African diaspora is the Orisha system that comes out of the Yoruba, the Ifa, or the Isese religion. Yeah. Then there's the lower, which is of the Fon, yeah, which is related to the Vudan tradition. You have the Abosom, yeah, of the Akan. You have the Minkisi of the Bakongo tradition. These are all communities of divinities, yes, principles in nature, okay, and principles of human development. And so the names for these communities of deities gives expression to the fact that this idea is very, very widespread, yeah, within African spirituality and culture. You have the Kimpulungu, yeah, again, which is another name in the Bakongo tradition. You have the Imandwa, which is of the Banawanda, it's Central Africa now. You have Olusi of the Igbo. You have the Ayan of the Oromo or the Somali, pre-Abrahamic, that is. This is the traditional spiritual system. You have the Nomo of the Dogon, and there are others whereby there is a name or names for the earth as a divinity itself. Yeah, and so in the Akan again, you have Asaseya, and then you have Nokulbuane in the Zulu, and there are others. Sometimes Ngai, for example, in the Kikuyu is represented by Mount Kilimanjaro, yeah, or that is said to be the dwelling place, yeah, of the creator. So the creator, that's the most prominent manifestation of the creator within the groups that surround Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, last week, I believe, I was thinking, I haven't even listened back to the presentation, but last week, I believe I was telling us an Akan creation story, and I said Asasaya when I meant to say Abrewa, yeah. So forgive me for that slip of the tongue, but they are related concepts here. Abrewa is the so-called old woman who was with the creator when the creator birthed the earth, basically, yeah. And so Abrewa is essentially our maternal line, yeah, our maternal lineage ancestor, okay, or the paternal lineage ancestor. All right. Look at yourself with the nitty goodness, okay? So these are just a few examples, yeah? We could get more exhaustive, but we don't want to overload with information. So I hope ones can take that in, yeah? We won't be going into all of these examples, but we will touch on a few, all right? So to give this greater explanation, in the book, The Handbook of Yoruba Religious Concepts, Baba Ifa Kolade explains, the Yoruba contend that the study of nature is foremost. Nature is viewed as the manifestation of Oludumare's essence through degrees of material substance. That essence, translated as Ashe, which is the life force, as you have explained previously, is the inherent force of all creation. The emphasis of such study or worship is not centered on the physical object or tangible, but on the life force energy that brings about its form. The tangible object is but a symbol of the eternal existence that bore it. Okay, so again, this is dealing with the connectedness of all things in nature. And so because all things in nature are manifestations of the creator, Mwari, yes, Mwari is the sum total of all things in creation, yeah, manifest in all that is. So everything in creation is to one degree or another an expression or manifestation of the supreme being, but in particular unitary forms. And so within the African sense of consciousness, words and concepts and ideas are developed around these specific forms in their distinguished format, so that we have are able to develop an understanding of them within those forms, yeah, as well as we do for ourselves. Okay, so just to touch on the most notable Orisha, there's one missing from this one. There's many missing, but there's one particular one that's missing, and I'll explain why in a second. Yeah, so we have Obatala. Yeah, Obatala is the creator of human form. So Obatala is a creator of agency. Sorry, a divinity of agency. Yeah, in terms of forming, molding the shapes and forms of things. Okay. Now I have heard some Babalawo suggest that, technically speaking, Obatala is Olodumare in a different kind, from a different understanding, but generally speaking, Obatala is referred to as an Orisha in today's world. So that is why I'm using what is why he's here, basically. Yeah. Elder of the Orisha, Obatala represents wisdom, purity, morality, strategy, high intelligence. Obatala is a peacemaker. He's a father figure. He's the god or deity of the white cloth, and that's what his name actually means. And one of his metals is silver. Yeah. So generally, if you see an Orisha depiction where somebody's wearing full white, generally all the time, that's Obatala. Obatala represents ritual purity. Okay. And these things. All right. Ilegba or Eshu, and I should have actually put Eshu here. Eshu is a very important divinity because he represents our linkage between the physical, the material, and the immaterial realm. Elegba Eshu is said to be the messenger of the Orisha. The courier of offerings, yeah, policeman of the Yoruba cosmology, guardian of the crossroads, holder of the Ashe power. So in terms of how Ashe manifests in its individualized, particularized forms, Eshu is the one who is charged with the responsibility of sharing out, divvying out, and carrying Orisha, or transporting it, or transforming it from one form to another. Yeah, among the Orisha, and one of his elements is the laterite stone. And now Eshu is particularly important because within the Ifa divination system, when you are giving offerings, you always engage Eshu or Elegba first because of the fact that he is the guardian of the crossroads. Yeah. So wherever divinity you are paying homage to, you begin by giving homage to Eshu. Yes, or Elegba. That's why he's very, very important. Okay. Now Ogun, yeah, Ogun is the Orisha of iron and of war. He's most popularly associated with war, but there's more to that. Creator of civilizations. So he's a builder, yes, of civilization. He represents courage, represents strength, justice, and oaths. He's the executioner, the path maker. So Oshun clears the path, yes. He removes obstacles out of your way. He represents force, stabilization, security, protection, vehicles and tools. So he is Oshun represents craft and craftsmanship. Yeah, and so so the priesthood associated with Ogun was a priesthood of craftsmen and women. Yeah. Then you have Yemonja, who represents motherhood. Yemonja is the mother of waters, and these are large expanses, yes, of water. So these are oceans and seas. Yemonja represents family, sexuality, family in the sense that Yemonja is a protector of children. Yeah, she's also said to represent the amniotic fluid of the womb. Okay, sexuality, sorcery, primal waters, nurturer. Then you have Oshun. Oshun is sensuality. Oshun, who is very popular nowadays because she's had a lot of representations in popular culture. But Oshun represents sensuality, fine arts, and humanity, love, beauty, graciousness, gracefulness. She is a divinity of wealth. They've got money here, but it's more than money; it's wealth. Yeah. Again, they use the word sorcery, luxury, brass, gold, cowrie, rivers. So Oshun is a divinity associated with smaller expanses of water, freshwater and rivers, lakes, and them kind of things there. She also represents intuition. Then you have Shango. Yes, Shango is kingliness, stateliness. He's an orator. Yeah, he is associated with thunder and lightning as a natural forces. Okay. He represents virility. He is the Orisha of dance and drum. Yeah, especially masculine expressions of dance and drum. Or Shango represents business, fire, lightning. He's represented in stones. He's a protector. He's a warrior. He also represents magnetism, because obviously lightning, and there's a relationship between lightning and electricity and magnetism. They call it electromagnetism. Then you have Oya, who is a tempest. She's the guardian of the cemetery. So this is the Orisha that is associated with ancestry. Okay, Oya's natural force is the wind itself. Yeah, she's a warrior. She's represented in hurricanes and storms. Yeah, so in a sense, yeah, when Marcus Mosiah Garvey says, "Look for me in the whirlwind and the storm," he's evoking the energy of Oya. Yes, he's saying that he will be associated with the energy or the divinity Oya, and she represents death and progression and transformation, understanding the fact that death within the African consciousness is not the end of life, but a transformation of one form of life to another form of life. Okay, and this is all guided by within the consciousness of Ifa by the divinity Oya. There are various different relationships between these Orisha, as told in the Odu Ifa, the sacred text of the Ifa or Ancestor religion. And so, for example, Shango and Oya are said to be husband and wife. Ogun and Oshun are said to be husband and wife. And there is even a narrative whereby Oshun left Ogun for Shango because Ogun wasn't going on correctly. All right, but we'll touch on Orisha narratives and the role that they play within the consciousness of the spiritual system in a second. Okay, I hope ones are with I and getting something from this presentation so far. All right. Right, so touching on the works of Brother Dalian Adofo in the book Ancestral Voices, he says there are also differences in the types of forces that are ancient in origin and have served communities from time immemorial and those of recent origin. This is perhaps most evident in the diaspora, where under extreme conditions of oppression and subjugation, i.e. the Ma'afa, i.e. enslavement, new forces were made manifest and added to the cosmological pantheon. In Haiti, for example, the new forces were referred to as petro spirits, and similarly also found in Cuba and in Brazil. An example being the force Agayu in Santeria, in the Santeria pantheon, an essence correlated with the power of the volcano, but absent in the original pantheon of Yoruba land, presumably because of the absence of volcanoes in this terrain. And so I put this here to demonstrate that the African consciousness seeks to harmonize with nature. So when it discovers something new in nature, it develops a spiritual concept around it. Yeah. The older spirits in Haiti Voodoo, yeah, or voodoo. So you have the Petro, which are the newer ones. Then you have the Rada, which are the older ones. Yeah. And there are different interpretations of Petro and Rada, because some would say that the Petro are more aggressive. Yeah, and the Rada are more humble. Okay, and that would make sense if we consider the context in which the Petro divinities would have been discovered, developed on, and channeled. Okay, in that condition of enslavement, we needed to be able to fight back. Yeah, and so those divinities were related to that specific experience. Okay, so we've got the evolution of the tradition here, and I'm saying this also to emphasize the fact that Africans didn't lose all of our spirituality during the enslavement process. We carried it with us, but not only did we carry it with us, we developed it. Yeah. So often for us in the diaspora, if we are looking to get into and understand African spirituality, we don't have to wait till we get to the continent. We can look for the African spiritual retentions where we're there. wherever there is a significant African population, there are African spiritual retentions. And I hope that point is made very, very clear. All right. So continuing with an understanding of natural forces in the book Ancestral Voices, Brother Dalian wants us to understand 3 specific things about concepts of natural forces within African spiritual traditions. Yeah. Firstly, he says they are not autonomous entities, separate from and functioning independently of the Supreme with their individual powers as found in the Greco-Roman stories. Yeah. So this is necessary to emphasize because of the imposition of the concept of polytheism on African spiritual understandings and African spiritual philosophies. Polytheism is fine in a European context. Leave it there. As is the case with monotheism. It's fine in a European context. Leave it there. We don't have that debate, yeah, with an African spiritual context, okay? Especially because, as he's explaining, that these divinities are considered to be a part of the whole, a part of the manifestation, the ultimate manifestation of the Creator. All right? Okay? Yeah. Right, let's go forward. Secondly, their usefulness is not confined to explanations about supernatural phenomena, but rather also has important functions in the development of the self, mentally and physically, as well as for social organization. Okay, we're going to touch on that last part in a second, all right? But they're useful. Now, bearing in mind, again, when people discuss African spirituality, generally speaking, they want to confine it or you know, there's this idea about magic, you know, because it fits in with the witchcraft, sorcery type characterizations, yeah, supernatural phenomena where, you know, a man say a prayer and the breeze blow down a house, or, you know, a man mix up a concoction and woman leave her man, yeah, and all them something there, yeah, right? But it ain't about really that, yeah. It's certainly not confined to that. The more fundamental aspect of it is that it functions in the development of the self. And we're going to be going more into the self next week, okay? Mentally, physically, as well as for social organization, yeah? So societies are organized around an understanding of natural forces. Just to give an example of this, I'm currently learning tree. And in Tree, so you saw earlier, the Tree is the language of the Ashanti or the Akan people. And you saw earlier that the name for the pantheon or community of divinities in the among the Akan is Abosom, yeah, Abosom. And so that word Bosom is the root word. Bosom is the singular, Abosom is the plural. And it's a term that can relate to the concept of spirit, but spirit within a particular context or a particular manifestation. And so there are communities, yeah, that with your paternal lineage, you associate your paternal lineage with communities that were developed around rivers, yeah. And so the community is given names like Bosom Pra or Bosom Twe, yeah, whereby the divinity or the spirit as associated with that river, the community comes to be known by that divinity or that river's divinity, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's one way in which social organization is explored or given manifestation through an understanding of natural forces. And we're gonna get into another one in a second. Okay. Thirdly, they are not external to the human being, but rather exist as aspects of our being, both mentally and physically, in pretty much the same way that nature is conceptualized as an extension of the human being, emphasizing the fact that we ourselves consider ourselves to be a force within nature, to be a part of the natural forces. Yes. And so when I was explaining that there's a Orisha missing, a primary Orisha missing from the 7 that were explained earlier, that Orisha is Ori, which is your head, your consciousness. The reason we're not going into it today is because we're going to go into it next week. But your Orisha is considered to be, so your Ori is considered to be in the Ifa divination system or Ifa cosmology, your primary Orisha. It is the Orisha that you consult before you consult any other Orisha. It is the Orisha that you appeal to before you consult any other Orisha. I believe in the first week I gave expression to the idea that it said in the Oduifa, no deity blesses a person without the consent of their Ori, which is their own consciousness. Okay? And so bear that in mind. Yeah. So the natural forces, we, in terms of seeking now to harmonize with nature, if the Creator is manifesting all things and being able to abide by the laws of the Creator is abiding by the laws of nature, we see ourselves as a part of that conceptualization, and therefore nature itself becomes our guide for self-development. Yeah. All right. So this is to give an expression in another spiritual system. This is a book called Facing Mount Kenya, written by Jomo Kenyatta, former president of the nation of Kenya, and he explains thusly from the Kikuyu, yes, the Kikuyu people and the Kikuyu cosmology. This is East Africa now. All right. He says, sorry, kings and queens, one aspect of Kikuyu religion remains to be indicated. Inevitably, the people are daily and hourly in the most intimate contact with nature. We have already seen that certain natural phenomena, the thunder and lightning, are regarded as direct manifestations of Ngai. Yeah. So if you've been listening, you will know that Ngai is the name for the supreme creator. Okay. And so thunder and lightning as manifestations of Ngai, that would relate to Shango in the Yoruba. All right. So thunder and lightning are regarded as direct manifestations of Ngai and his works. We shall see later that he controls not only the health and lives of men and the beasts on whom men depend, but also the rain and the supply of food which the rain brings to the soil. Hence, all these phenomena of nature are in some degree, like thunder, imbued with the spirit of Ngai. Any description of Kikuyu religion which left these out of account would be incomplete. We cannot speak of nature worship as a department of the religion, but it is a quality that runs through the whole, vitalizing it and keeping it in constant touch with daily needs and emotions. Why am I emphasizing the use of the word vitalizing? Because last week I delved into the work of Baba Kimbwa Dende Kiabun Seki Fukiyao, and he was emphasizing the idea of vitalism, yes, and vitality. And in fact, the word Kimoyo, yes, relates to moyo being vital force, okay, vital force, ki pertaining to, of, yes, the vital force, pertaining to the vital force, in reverence to the vital force. So you're seeing that this similar, when we're translating all these concepts into English, our ancestors are finding, and elders are finding similar language independent of each other. And we're seeing that, and I'm hoping that I'm emphasizing the ubiquity of these ideas within African cultures throughout these presentations, okay? And so in this respect now, it would seem that the Kikuyu cosmology is not codified in the same way as the Yoruba or the Akan in that kind of way, all right? But the basic concept, yes, still is present. So they may not have a separate name for different, Orisha in the same way, yes? But the basic concept is there. This is what is meant when we say that Kimoyo, African spirituality, is dealing with different forms of the same essence. Okay, different forms of the same essence. And I am humbled. I am absolutely humbled. I want to say a greetings to my sister Able over there from Nation Kamit in France. I'm humbled by your presence, my sister. It's good to have you here. And yes, I do look forward to hearing if you have any feedback, anything, any responses or anything to say in relation to the quality of what I am presenting today. Be up also my brother Tahaka, the Emperor of the World. Good to have you here as well, my brother. All right, so that is coming from the Kikuyu tradition now. All right, we give thanks, even though we have issues with Jomo Kenyatta's politics. This book is a very useful book. All right, this book is a very useful book. Okay, so we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna explain something now. We're going into now. We're kind of veering towards where we're gonna go next week, yeah. But understanding that ourselves are a part of the forces of nature. And one of the ways this is made manifest in the Akan cosmology is through the understanding of Anansie or Kweku Anansie. Yes, this is an Adinkra symbol. All right, Adinkra symbols is like a body of symbolic knowledge as developed by the Akan people. All right, and this symbol is Anansie in Tontan. And it means spider's web, yeah, and that literally means spider on Tontan web, yeah. Symbol of wisdom, creativity, and the complexities of life. So there are some who would say that Anansie in the Akan is related to Obatala in the Ifa or the Yoruba. Some say he's also related to Eshu, yeah, and really he could be related to both, okay. But and I've also heard that Anansie is Abosom. Then some say, well, he's not necessarily Abosom, but he's also an expression of the creator in a particular form, and that particular form is actual agency, yeah, and we'll explore that in a second, okay. Right. So Kweku Anansie, taken from the Encyclopedia of African Religion by Molefiketi Asante and Mambo Ama Mazama, says Anansie is the name given to an Akan character who has become famous throughout Africa because of his insight, intelligence, and wisdom. One finds the names Anansie, Aunt Nancy, Anansie, Hapanzi, and Nanzi used for Anansie as well. Some of these names are not on the continent, they're found in the diaspora. So I'm emphasizing the fact that we took our spirituality and our culture with us. We never left it in Africa. All right. He is one of the most important figures in the pantheon of cultural icons among West Africans. In actuality, Anansie is the functional aspect, as I explained before, is the functional aspect of the Almighty creator, Nyame or Onyame, yeah. Variously referred to as Onyame, Nyankapong, Odemankoma, Aurade, yeah, and others, yeah. He is able to perform many duties that are often attributed to Onyame. Thus, Anansie can cause rain to come, flowers to blossom, and maize to grow. He can prevent disasters from occurring to villagers, yeah. Continuing. There are many narratives of power in the life of Anansie. He is credited in some stories with creating the sun, moon, stars, and planets. So again, that's the agency. That's the functional part of Nyame, him herself. Okay. In others, it is said that Anansie, and by the way, this is also given emphasis to the fact that there are various different understandings and stories around Anansie. Okay. In others, it is said that Anansie is the one who brought writing, agriculture, and hunting to the earth, teaching humans in the process how to take care of themselves in a world surrounded by bountiful fields and forests. So smart was Anansie, according to one narrative, that he collected all the wisdom of the world in a calabash to hold for himself, because he did not trust humans with such potent knowledge and information. This story, and that last part is just one interpretation of the story. But this this story is given expression in probably the most famous story associated with Anansie, and that is often translated into English as Anansie and the Sky God. Yeah, Anansie and the Sky God. Okay, all right. And in Tree, that would be Kweku Anansie ne Nyankopon. Yeah, yeah. I believe I got that correct. All right, I'm learning. Yeah, all right. All right. So, however, wisdom kept spinning out of the calabash, and he soon saw how futile it was for one person to try and know everything and to hold it for himself. Yeah. In fact, it is far better, as Anansie understood, for knowledge and wisdom to be distributed among all people, and so that is exactly what he did. Consequently, now no people are any smarter than any other people because Anansie distributed wisdom from his calabash bowl. So I hope we're seeing where this relates to what Brother Dalian Adolfo was explaining earlier in terms of natural forces being symbols for human development, guides for human development. No one individual can know whatever everything. Wisdom is by nature spread across everybody, and everybody must share in it. Yeah, and so this is given expression through this understanding of Anansie, who is at once a divinity, but at the same time a man, or a Spider-Man. This is the original Spider-Man. Okay, so what is this? Why? We're going to get into it. Of course, Anansie is really the king of all wisdom narratives. Nothing escapes Anansie. He knows everything, and the Asante people tell the story of how Nyame made Anansie the king of all the narratives. That relates to the story again. Kweko Anansie ne Nyankopon. Yeah? Anansie and the Sky God. Taken from the book, The Marriage of Anansewa, written by an ancestor by the name of Efua Sutherland. Yeah? She is an Asante ancestor, and she was developing she was evolving the tradition of the Ashanti. Now let me see. Sorry, excuse me 1 second, family. I just want to make sure of something, because I've got the impression that I've left the slide out of this, and I have. Yeah. So let me pause for a second. All right, because it is right to. Yeah. You know when you just remember that you didn't do something. So I've got to correct that right now, kings and queens. In another one of Aikrama's books here, it's called The Eloquence of the Scribe, a memoir on the sources and resources of African literature. Okay, a memoir on the sources and resources of African literature. All right, this is him now explaining how he developed his writing style and tradition by exploring literary traditions across the African continent. And when I say across the African continent, I mean across the African continent, east, west, north, and south. Okay? Right. So I'm just trying to find, because he's explaining something now about the storytelling traditions, yeah, of his people, and I may come back to this later on as well. Bear with me, family, because I can't find the page, and I was finding it easy before. Sure. Oh, here we go. All right. So he says, my mother's family was descended matrilineally from the founders of 3 villages in the fancy rural hinterland near Cape Coast. Since Akankwi mothers determined the choice of rulers, my elder brother Ai and I were expected, when our ruling uncles died, to succeed them as heads of the 3 villages. Yeah, and so basically they had to learn a lot of the history of the family. All right. Now he says, ordinary Akan stories are known as Anansie, after the spider who figures in many of them as folk anti-hero. Family histories are esoteric, distinguished from ordinary exoteric stories by a different name. They are called Abakosem. And a working phrase would be narratives of times past. Literally, Abba, it has happened. Ko, it is gone. Asem, matter or narrative. Yeah. And so, Anansisem are the cosmological kind of stories, yeah, of the people. Abakosem are the actual history, yeah, the things where it actually go on, the things that actually happened, all right, among the people. So that's a brief explanation. So basically, this figure, this divinity, Anansie, becomes symbolic of a whole body of wisdom. In fact, wisdom in general, and that wisdom is transmitted through stories that are told in communal settings and shared with the community. So, Efwa T. Sutherland, who is also an inheritor of this tradition, was developing it into a theatrical setting, which she referred to as Anansie Goro, yeah, which is the plays associated with Anansie theater, okay. And so she writes this play called The Marriage of Anansiwa and also Edufa, yeah. And she explains in the introduction, by constantly overreaching himself, he ruins his schemes and ends up impoverished, yeah. That Anansie is artistically... No, I've missed something out of this. You know, let's make mistakes, things, please bear with me. Make sure that I'm telling people the right thing. Okay. All right, I'll read it here and get back to it, yeah? So by overreaching himself, he ruins his schemes and ends up impoverished. That Anansie is artistically a medium for society to criticize itself can be seen in the expression, exterminate Anansie and society will be ruined, yeah? So, no, I have missed something out here, yeah? So let me get back to this. Sorry, family. Right. Okay, so it says, who is Anansie? And why should so many stories be told about him? Anansie appears to represent a kind of everyman, artistically exaggerated and distorted to serve society as a medium of self-examination. Yes, he has a penetrating awareness of the nature and psychology of human beings and animals. He is also made to mirror in his behavior fundamental human passions, ambitions, and follies, as revealed in contemporary situations. Significantly, laughter is the main social response to Anansie as a character. In addition, it is in the verbal comments which often underscore the laughter that society's attitude towards him is clarified. One of the most representative is Anansie's wealth, a sarcastic expression for successes and triumphs which are not likely to last. Indeed, most of Anansie's successes are doubtful and temporary. By constantly overreaching himself, he ruins his schemes and ends up impoverished. That Anansie is artistically a medium for society to criticize itself can be seen in the expression exterminate Anansie and society will be ruined, yeah? So this Anansie is meant to represent everybody in the society, okay? He's the everyman, all right? And so he must, in the stories, he must manifest imperfections so that the community can learn from those imperfections, if that makes sense. So in that context, in the stories, he is brought down to the level of humanity, whereas on another sense, he is elevated in the form of a deity, okay? So I hope ones and ones are appreciating the deep culture, the high culture and deep thought involved in that symbolism right there. Now, I don't know if this is this is a fact, yeah. I suspect it is, but I'm saying I don't know because I haven't done the direct research on this. But in the paper, okay, we're going to come back to that, yeah. So in the paper, Digging Up the Past, yeah, by Baba Kimwadende Kiyabuseki Fukiyao, he says to control one's square, Kinzungidila, I don't know why I stumbled on that. Kinzungidila from within requires a total knowledge of the whole Kinzungidila. Meaning you must know your own square. Okay, don't worry if you don't get it, but I'll explain. All right, which means creating physical, mystical, spiritual, and even telepathic means of communication through all its corners. This is making oneself a second sun radiating within one's own environment. Yeah. So the human being within the Kikongo tradition, the Bakongo tradition, is seen as a living sun, Muntu. Yes. And so you must create radiance around yourself through controlling your own square, your own space, your own mind, your own body, your own spirit, and knowing it as well as you can. Yes. Radiating from one's Kizingudila is installing one's minieni tebula, rays or radius all over one's field of growth, even beyond it. These mini rays become one's power force, not only of communication, but also of control within and outside as well. These means constitute Miyakese antenna. Once his main ensemble bridges diagonals installed across his square word with his unkudulu natural growth, the art of making one's kikulu history, man makes his environment a lukosi lua luzingu. That should say, sorry, not luzingu, lua zingu, a net of survival. Yeah, a net of survival. Now, this is how Baba Kimwadende in the paper conceptualizes the net. Yes. So bear all this in mind. Look at these images very carefully. Obviously, it looks like a spider's web, right? Okay. So Kizungi Dila, yeah, relates to this concept of Lukosi Lua Zingu, a net of survival. Yes. This Lukosi net helps him to make his life possible in his environment, no matter how hostile or poor that environment may be. This Lukosi, in other words, signifies ensemble of knowledge and techniques required in order to control a given environment and be able to survive its conditions socially, politically, economically. This Lukosi, Zingu, web of life, became at once his net, his pitfall, Lubila, and his Ndobo Daki, hook, which helps him to catch his prey, build his shelter, save his food, fight against his enemies, control his fertility, and more. Thanks to this web of life, he can move and communicate within and outside of his Kinzungidila, yes, the world square. Okay. Finally, the Bantu concept of Lukosi, the net or web of life, as one can meet it among the Congo, is their technological, symbolic source of answers to man's political, educational, economical, and technological needs. One who has this concept clearly must have the power to respond to his needs if he is really master of his Kinzungudila. Yes. As a matter of fact, one can find most of the earliest Bantu tools, objects of art and crafts, nets, basket, liana bridges, house framing, roof, and so on, are rupestral drawings reflect this pattern of Lukosi, Lua, Zingu, the web of survival of life, yes, based not only on their technological concept, but on their world's view as well, yeah. So what I'm suggesting is that this consciousness of Anansie is made manifest in the Bakongo system through this Lukosi symbolism, okay? Understanding that Anansie also represents survival. Anansie represents wisdom, and Anansie represents being able to negotiate one's environment. This is why Anansie is the trickster, because Anansie is, as a spider, is able to outwit animals that would be considered to be stronger or greater than himself. And so when I was growing up, I am from, my paternal line is from Jamaica. And so we grew up with Anansie stories. Anansie, Kwekwa Anansie is not strange to us. And so when I was being taught Anansie stories as a child, my father put it in the context of Africans being enslaved and having to learn how to negotiate forces that had more military power than themselves and negotiate those environments. So survival became, and a survival instinct became paramount and primary. And in order to manifest it, one had to use wisdom and knowledge and all these things, yeah? And so there seems to be a correlation in symbolism between the Akan and the Bakongo systems in this regard. And I hope ones and ones are understanding where I was going with that, okay? Forgive me, I'm working on my Congo, and I'll get there at some point, all right? So now, just to explain a bit further in terms of how the forces in nature can give us, are formulated into stories and narratives that allow us to develop ourselves, our community. I'll give examples of community. We've alluded, I've given examples of individual development. We've alluded to community development, and let's give more expression to that right about now. Okay, taken from the book. Taken from the book "Religion in West Africa," traditional religion, in West Africa, edited by A.E. Adegbola. Yeah, this is from a chapter written by the same author called "A Historical Study of Yoruba Religion." And so they give an explanation of that here. This is a story associated with Obatala, who is the old Orisha, ancient Orisha of ritual purity, wisdom, divination, and so on and so forth. Okay, those who were responsible, Baba Adegbola says, for spreading the Shango cult. So I should explain that within the Yoruba society, you have different communities that are devotees to specific Orisha, yes? And so the Ifa religion, in essence, is a conglomeration of different spiritual communities that have their own unique ways of performing ritual and so on and so forth, okay? And so Obatala has his devotees, Shango has his devotees, Oya, Osho, Yemonja has his and her devotees. Eshu generally doesn't necessarily have a specific shrine because Eshu is represented at all the rest of their shrines. All right? Okay. So it says those who are responsible for spreading the Shango cult would certainly have to contend with the popular Obatala cult, which went back to time immemorial, the time before Oduduwa, and expressing the fact of the invincibility even in the face of an Oduduwa takeover of the land. Yeah. So obviously, the contention between Obatala worshippers and the vanguard of the cult of Shango was depicted in later myths and ritual plays, such myths speak of Obatala and Shango as friends. Yeah. So to explain this a little bit further, there are at least 3 different versions of creation stories in the Ifa or Yoruba cosmology. The oldest are those that are associated with Obatala. Yes. So what I mean here is that there are 3 primary agents here, or central figures, yeah, in these versions of stories, and they represent, based upon Baba Adegbola's research, developments in the Yoruba nation. And so Obatala being the person, the Orisha who formed, yes, the shape of human beings, he is the oldest, yeah, the oldest stories are associated with him. Then at some point, Oduduwa, as a historical figure, comes into play and has an impact upon the social organization of the people, so that it kind of renews, yeah, the Yoruba nation. So he Oduduwa now becomes the progenitor, the primary progenitor of the Yoruba. Sorry, but before that you have Orunmila. Yes, Orunmila now is the individual who was said to have revealed the Ifa divination system. Yeah, so you have Obatala, Orunmila, and Oduduwa. Okay, and these various different traditions are made manifest in the variety of the creation stories that exist within the Yoruba cosmology. Now, some say that there's contention, yeah, at the different points during which these transitions are taking place, and so these contentions are storyalized and made manifest in mythology that preserve the lessons for the story for future generations to come. All right. So such myths speak of Obatala and Shango as friends. Let's continue. The story is told that Obatala once decided to pay a visit to his friend Shango and insisted on going in spite of oracular predictions of an ill-fated journey. It happened that as he got near his friend's kingdom, he saw his friend's horse, which had escaped, and took it in order to return it to his friend Shango. Shango's servants, who did not recognize him, as in Obatala, took him for a thief. They held him and put him in prison, where he languished for 7 years. During the period, however, Shango's kingdom was struck by climactic misfortunes, which made life in society miserable. When consulted, the oracle pointed to an innocent man languishing in jail. Shango later identified his friend Obatala and had him released. This myth and the ritual plays connected with it established the Obatala cult as only one among others, able to assert its lasting quality only through its moral strength, particularly loyalty, patience, and long-suffering. If Obatala represents Ile-Ife, the founding city of the Yoruba, and Shango represents Oyo, a later city of the Yoruba, the implications for social history and relationships among the Yoruba is clearly that if Ile-Ife has to accept being just one among the other Yoruba towns, yet having a moral and spiritual influence among all. It is significant that this simple truth has been ritualized. Yeah. So this narrative gives expression to a time of contention among two different sets of devotees, and so because Shango did not recognize Obatala for who Obatala was, Shango imprisoned Obatala, yes, and Obatala was wronged, and the wronging of Obatala brought misfortune to the land, yes. And so in order to bring back fortune to the land, Shango had to correct the wrong that he had done, yes, to Obatala. But also Obatala has to respect the province, yeah, of Shango. And so this myth is ritualized. It's put in the form of ritual drama to preserve the lesson. And so it's designed to reconcile the community to itself, if that makes sense. But these are both natural forces or forces of increation. I hope ones and ones appreciate where we're going with that. How long have I been going for? All right, we've got a bit longer to go, and then we're going to wrap up and open up for Q and A. Okay, so now we get to ancestors. What you see in the background here is a depiction of masquerade. Yeah, Egun. Egun is the Egun is the Yoruba word for ancestors. And then Egungun is the community of ancestors, yeah, in that regard. And so behind the word ancestors, you're seeing a depiction of masquerade. This is where we get carnival from. I want you to know that. Okay. So, in order to understand ancestors, we must understand this concept that Brother Leader Bandaka, my father, calls the rhythmic cycle of life. The rhythmic cycle of life. In the African consciousness, life is a cycle, a series of cycles, and some conceptualize it as a spiral, yes? A series of progressive cycles, okay? That begins in terms of coming through into the physical realm with conception and birth. Then we have growth and maturation. Then we have adolescence, adulthood, procreation, eldership, passing over, and then we have ancestorship. So we don't just die, we become ancestors, yeah, within the African consciousness. And so this this cosmograph gives expression to all the natural forces and how life is a cycle that is balancing all these natural forces. I'm not going to go into depth into this today, but just to say that we have the concept of what we were taught were natural imperatives and cultural imperatives. Natural imperatives are imperatives in our life cycle, or events in our life cycle that are determined by nature. When we're born, we grow. Yes, these are natural. Yes, but then in order, because as we were discussing last week, we're in a dance with nature. The rhythm of the natural cycle or the natural imperatives is given expression by the cultural imperatives, which are compelling events in our life cycle that are determined by cultural tradition. And the cultural imperatives are designed to harmonize with the natural imperatives. For example, when baby born, there is a naming ceremony. You celebrate the coming of this new life, and the first gift outside of life that you give the baby is a name. Okay? Growth and maturation, when you are growing into adulthood, it is accompanied by rites of passage, a process of bringing men and women into adulthood, which is then culminating in an initiation ceremony. When you are an adult, now once you're an adult, you are eligible for marriage and procreation, and that is made symbolic, or the cultural imperative that comes along with that natural imperative is marriage. Yes. Then now you are also initiated into eldership. You don't just become an elder because of age. You are initiated into eldership, and then when you pass over, or you have a passing over ceremony, yes, that symbolizes your transition into another stage of life in which you are an ancestor. Okay, and then ancestors are said to have a relationship with the community because they are reborn into the community. Yeah, so they share their life force energy in the rebirth of new life into the community. And I hope ones appreciate that, okay, or understand that. All right. Returning to ancestral voices, Brother Dalian Adolfo explains. The status of ancestors is not one achieved automatically by death. There are conditions to be first fulfilled. The individual would have lived a long and dutiful life to their families and the society at large. This individual is held to be an enlightened being, one that has achieved self-realization as reflected in the title given them by the Akan Nana. The Akans hold that the Akans hold that the state of nanahood, that state of nanahood as the goal and fulfillment of human life. You want to achieve nana, yes. The phrase nananom nsamanfo meaning the giver and source of enlightenment. Yes, I should say that the ancestors in Akan are considered, generally speaking, called Nsamanfo ancestors. Nananom Nsamanfo is also the terminology, but then Nananom relates to, again, the giver of and source of enlightenment. So that is how the ancestors are seen and viewed. Is the invocation used when any Akan prays at any time to the supreme deity? Yeah. Once again, ancestors are invoked in praying to the supreme. Okay. Returning to facing Mount Kenya by Jomo Kenyatta. So we're going to East Africa now, back to the Kikuyu. The function of an elder both in his own family group and in the community, is one of harmonizing the activities of various groups. That's the role of the elders, living and departed. Yes, the elders are seen as the intermediary between the community and the ancestors. In his capacity of mediator, his family group and community in general respect him for his seniority and wisdom, and he in turn respects the seniority of the ancestral spirits. This is because he realizes that his present elevated position is due to the care and guidance rendered him by his departed ancestors, and whatever he gives them not in form of a prayer, but in gratitude, and to hold their memory green, fresh. Having this in mind, we can now proceed to discuss what is generally called ancestor worship. In this account, I shall not use that term because from practical experience, I do not believe that the Kikuyu worship their ancestors. They hold communion with them, but their attitude towards them is not at all to be compared with their attitude towards the deity who is truly worshipped. To clarify this point, I shall therefore use the term communion with ancestors. Let me just explain this a little bit before. No problem, Sister Able. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Yes, sister. Do watch back the playback and give me any feedback that you have in terms of what I presented. Okay. Thank you for joining me, Sister Able. All right. So let me explain this now. Relating back now, to the rhythmic cycle of life. Okay. It must be understood that connectivity and connection, interconnectedness, is constantly reinforced in African ritual. Connectedness with the forces of nature, connectedness with the ancestors, the community's connectedness with itself. And so a community, a nation, would be considered incomplete without the ancestors. So the presence of the ancestors must constantly be reinforced in ceremony. Yes, in all aspects of human endeavor, because the community must remain whole. Okay, all right. That is the significance of communion with ancestors. Okay, all right. So Jomo Kenyatta continues. Bear with me. The computer runs slow. Okay. The ancestral spirits can act individually or collectively. There are three main recognized groups in the spirit world. The spirits of the father or mother, Ngoma, Kia, Akiyari, which communicate directly with the living children and which can advise or reproach the children in the same way as they did during the lifetime. 2, the clan spirits, Ngoma, Kia, Moherega, which have an interest in the welfare and prosperity of the clan. Yeah, they act collectively in accordance with the living clan, administering justice according to the behavior of the clan or any of its members. 3, age group spirits, Ngoma Kia Rika, sorry. These are concerned with the activities of their particular age groups. Now, in various different spiritual systems, you'll find sometimes, mass communities of ancestors, and sometimes you find different groups of ancestors. So, for example, Vadzimo or Mudzimo in the Shona is considered to be like family, spirits, okay, or family ancestors. Then you have the Mhorondo, which are like the elevated or deified ancestors of the Shona nation itself. Supreme above all in such regards is, as far as the Shona is concerned, is Umbuya Nehanda, Nyakisikana Umbuya Nehanda. These are ancestors who are elevated because of their significance, their role within the community, which you will touch on a little bit more in a second. This group, in other words, can be called tribal spirits, for it is the age group which unifies the whole tribe. It is the spirits of this group which enter into tribal affairs. The three groups of the spirits, composed of young and old men, women, and children in their respective age groups, are joined in a wider group. So it is an understanding of the ancestors that keeps the social organization intact. Yeah, this grouping corresponds to a tribal organization of the spirit world. it directs its activities to the more important matters of the tribe. It is not interested in individuals, for the behavior of an individual is dealt with by the members of the groups which are closely related to that particular individual. So I hope that we're seeing now that the fact that the role that ancestors play in African communal consciousness, African spiritual consciousness, is a communal one. Okay? All right. Now we're going to do the concept of deified ancestors, returning to ancestral voices. These are those individuals whose works have benefited the community as a whole. They do not just become ancestors per se, but are also afforded the recognition as one who has indeed become like the Creator, attending to the needs of all and sundry. It is this disposition that informs the godlike status their godlike status, as their acts are viewed in line with how nature provides for human beings in general, without preferences given for particular individuals. It is a sacred practice among Africans worldwide and consistently practiced in all communities too. Example of this, so we have the Papyrus of Ani, which is the most famous version of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, known with the Book of the Dead, more properly referred to as the pt3. And so we have this example now of ancestors in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, the deceased transitioning into the spirit world, going through the Duat, is aiming to be declared Ma'at Keru, true of voice, by Osiris, or Asar, okay, as judged by in the court of Asar, according to the laws of Ma'at, as documented by Jehuti, okay. And so once one is declared true of voice, the one who is declared true of voice is likened to Asar himself, and so the term now Asar Ani, because the person's name is Ani. So if this was Fela and Nicola Pakuti, it would be the Asar Fela, for example, okay. And so the person, because of their achievement, is now likened with the divine archetype of human beings, which is Asar, and it says the town of Unu, the Asar Ani saith, the town of Unu is open, my head is sealed up, Jehuti, perfect is the eye of Heruz. I have delivered the eye of Heru, which shineth with the splendors on the brow of Ra, the father of the Netta. I am that self same Asar, the dweller in Amentet. Asar knoweth his day, and he knoweth that he shall live through his period of life. I shall have by being with him. I am the moon god, or sometimes pronounced Yah, or Ia, the dweller among the Netta. I shall not come to an end. Stand up, therefore, O Heru, for thou art counted among the Netta. Another part of it says, the Asar Ani saith, I am the great one, son of a great one. I am fire, the son of fire. I am the one to whom was given his head after it had been cut off. The head of Asar was not carried away from him. Let not the head of Asar Ani be carried away from him. I have knitted myself together again. I have made myself whole and complete. I have renewed my youth. I am Asar, the Lord of eternity. And so through the remembrance of the ancestors achieve eternity, eternal life, through our remembrance, through their connection, through their sustained connection with their community, with their people, with their nation. There is, there is no concept of a final day of judgment. Judgment in this regard grants you the honor of being regarded and remembered among the living. Yes, remaining a part of the community. There is no heaven, yes, where people go to and they dwell in solitude and serenity forever and ever. The life is a cycle, yes, and so the ancestors continue to perpetuate, yeah, or be a part of that spiraling cycle of life. Okay, and I hope ones understand that from the African-centered conception. By the way, this is here, yeah, because last week I couldn't find this slide, and I just found it funny that when I was going through this, it was just in the wrong place. Yeah, it was just in the wrong place. I found that funny, so I just left it in there so that people know that I actually did put it in the presentation last week. It was just in the wrong place. Okay, so we're gonna go forward from here. By the way, Kings and Queens, do get this book. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. Check it out. Okay. All right. So now the most common way that ancestors are given representation in African spiritual systems is through the ritual of libation. I was taught going through my rites of passage program, which is why the image that you see here is my manhood initiation ceremony, and I had to recite this on this day. Libation is the ritual for evoking the spirits of Mudzimu Mukulu, which is the great ancestors. That's Shona. It means the great ancestors. We evoke the spirits of Mudzimu Mukulu as the medium and the pathway to Mwari Nyakusika, which is the creator, God the creator. In remembrance and veneration, let me explain that first one. We were not brought into creation, but through the lineage of our ancestors. Yeah. So because the creative life force brought us into creation through an ancestral line, we honor the creative life force through that ancestral line. In honoring the ancestral line, you are honoring the lineage through which that creative life force chose to bring you into existence. Yeah? Hope ones understand that. In remembrance and veneration of their names and great legacies, yeah, this which is explained before, to imbibe their spirits and engender their character. So we don't just look at the ancestors as individuals in the past. We look at their characters, yes, that allow them to achieve what they achieved, to employ them to join and continue to be with us because they are part of the community. You must come join with. It's like when you have a birthday and you invite everybody wrong, you must invite your ancestors too, yeah, because without them you would not be here. To beseech their blessings and favor, and in a pledge to continue their traditions. I'm nearly finished, Kings and Queens. We're nearly there. All right. Now, the most comprehensive text that I'm aware of that addresses the issue of libation is this one. Libation, an African ritual heritage in the circle of life, by Brother Kimani Nehusi. I should say elder brother Kimani Nehusi. He is a scholar, used to live over here, Pan-Africanist, in the community, was a member of a number of organizations. He now teaches at Temple University in Philadelphia in the US of A. And he says thusly, I'm just going to read because I know I want to wrap up and get into some Q&A, okay? Libation is a ritual of heritage within the African cycle of life. In the world view of Africa, this circle is described and represented by transformation through different stages and states in the human journey through existence, from dwelling in the spirit world, coming into this sphere, the physical world, birth and naming, puberty, initiation and adulthood, marriage and procreation, eldership, transition into the spirit world again, ancestorship, and sometimes elevation into divinity, as you've already seen with the concept of Nana and Umhorondo, and so on and so forth. Each stage in this circle is marked by appropriate rituals of heritage that indicate status, transformation, and also clarify and make smooth each process of transformation, thus rendering the entire journey easier. Such rites include naming ceremonies, initiation ceremonies, marriage ceremony, transition ceremonies, and rites of elevation to divinity. Libation is an important part of each of these aspects of the African ritual universe and so of African existence. But libation recognizes, indicates, and acknowledges far more than humanity's transition and change through spaces and space and times and time. In fact, as we shall shortly see, libation is founded upon two elementary and demonstrable truths about the cosmos. The first is that the universe is a single integrated whole composed of interdependent elements. The second is that to impair any of the relations that hold these elements together in a harmoniously functioning order is ultimately to threaten the existence of all the elements, so that should say, in the whole, and therefore the entire cosmos itself. So I hope we're finding the linkages here again between interconnectedness, our place in the universe, harmony with nature, dancing with nature, and so on and so forth. Okay. The following model of libation, of a libation statement, is taken from the Ewe customary tradition, still alive in parts of Ghana, Benin, Togo, and Nigeria. So this is the first time we've been introduced to specifically to the Ewe tradition. So I give thanks for that. But it is related to other traditions in West Africa as well. But we give thanks for our Ewe ancestors. It was given to this writer by brother expert Nana Kofi, who is also Nana Kofi, who is also an activist that lives in the UK, Kings and Queens, who obtained it from Kofi Kogi, MD, an elder who is much interested in these matters. The information here is corroborated by examples of libation from other sources employed in this work. It shows continuities with much of the practice in other African communities and indicates the essential elements of a libation statement. Yeah, the ritual drama of libation is therefore a process that is likely to be identified by all or by a combination of some of these stages. Yeah, libation is put in these ways: invocation of the creator, invocation of the lesser divinities. I hate that terminology, lesser divinities. Yeah, but when people say lesser divinities, they're referring to the forces in nature. Orisha, Abosom, etc., etc. Invocation of the ancestors, introduction of the self, i.e. the person for libation, including a statement on his or her genealogy. You must declare yourself according to your ancestry, in the name of your ancestry. Yeah. Statement of the mission, i.e. of the specific purpose of the particular libation. This needs not to be one purpose. Yeah. 6, the petition or request for blessing, support, and protection in pursuit of the stated purpose or purposes. 7, the pouring of the liquid. The liquid can be water. The liquid can be water infused with herbs. The liquid is often spirits. Yeah. Announcement of the return from the mission. Welcome by the crowd. So it's a communal endeavor. Sipping from a common cup. Communing with the ancestors requires us to sip. Yeah. From a common cup, which in the celebration of Kwanzaa is referred to as the Umoja, yeah, the cup of unity. So these are just depictions of libation as found in ancient Kemet. Pouring libation onto the body of Asuru, the corn divinity. Source, Charles Finch, in his book Echoes of the Dark Land. Yeah. And I want to say something here, that trees, libation is often poured onto the ground because the ground is the dwelling place of the ancestors. And trees are all often central to spiritual ceremonies and traditions and rituals across the African diaspora, on the continent and in the Americas and everywhere with it. Partly because, quite literally speaking, the ancestors are buried in the soil. Their bodies therefore fertilize the soil, and that the benefits of that fertility are absorbed by the vegetation, the trees. And so because of the reality of trees, yeah, the souls and the spirits and the energy of the ancestors is considered to be within the tree itself. So rituals are often conducted around trees, okay, as far, especially ancestral rituals. All right, so I hope ones and ones understand that. And then finally, I want to end by kind of giving a preview as to where we're going to go next week. Yeah. So in this book, Civilization and Barbarism, an authentic anthropology, Baba Sheikh Anta Diop, in one of the last chapters, is explaining the importance of culture. And he explains culture in 3 dimensions: the psychic dimension, the historical dimension, and the linguistic dimension. Okay, and so we're going to delve into what he says in terms of the historical dimension right here. This will preview where we're going to be going next week. Yeah, he says, we have said earlier that a people without a historical conscience is a population. The loss of national sovereignty and of historical consciousness following a prolonged foreign occupation engenders stagnation or even sometimes regression, disintegration, and even the partial return to barbarism. But then, what would we call an African history? Yeah, we need to distinguish. Sorry, let me just explain this a little piece. All right. Historical consciousness, he's saying, is what is the principal agent in the development of a people. When a people lose their historical consciousness, they lose their national sovereignty, and therefore they lose their ability to develop along their own self-defined line. So they will begin to regress and degenerate. And we can see that within well, let me stop there, because I'll explain that a little bit later on, all right? But then what would we call an African history? We need to distinguish two levels. The immediate one of the local histories, so they're deeply lived, in which the African people is segmented by diverse exterior forces, the principle of which is colonization, are shriveled up and find themselves trapped and are vegetating today. What he's saying is that our current people groups that we are so deeply embedded in at the moment are inextricably linked, yeah? That, I should say, their current formation is inextricably linked, yeah, to the disintegration and the destruction of African civilization and culture. And because of that, we are vegetating in them today, because we are not currently formulated in social organization that facilitates growth and development. Yeah, and our understanding of our history, or the loss of our history, is a primary factor in that dynamic. Okay, all right. A second level, more general, further off in time and space, and including the totality of our people, comprises the general history of Black Africa, insofar as research permits restoring it today from a purely scientific approach. Each history is thus pinpointed and correctly situated in relation to general historical coordinates. Thus, all the continent's history is re-evaluated according to a new unitary standard suited to revive and to cement, on the basis of established facts, all the inert elements of the ancient historical mosaic. Where are we at? Okay. So what he's saying, and Elder Brother KIMOYO Husi makes this point in the book Libation, and I'm making this point, that the restoration of respect and dignity for our African ancestors is a Pan-African imperative. In other words, it has the wherewithal to help us to reconstitute our historical conscience and cultural continuity, and therefore form new social organizations that will aid us in elevating ourselves out of the current conditions that we find ourselves in. I am saying that our indoctrination has caused us to negate our ancestors, to reject our ancestors, to condemn our ancestors, and our current condition is commensurate with the extent to which we have condemned, rejected, and negated our ancestors. And so, African spirituality, therefore, because of its focus on ancestors and ancestor veneration, has a powerful social function within the lives of African people in today's world. And next week, we are going to be dealing with the subject of the self, ritual, and nationhood. And so I was going to end with a piece on the national aspect as it relates to ancestors, but I'll go into that next week because it's 9 o'clock now, and we want to get into the Q&A period. So I do hope that ones have got something from that. But stay tuned, please, because I'm going to go into it a little bit next week, yeah, in terms of nationhood and how that relates to ancestry. So give thanks one and all for listening. I'm going to, end the presentation here, and we are going to open up to ones who want to come through. So I'm going to share the link in the chat. Anybody who wants to come through, ask a question, share a word, add to whatever has been stated today. Correct me if I've been in error at any point, or even challenge anything that I have said. Feel free to do so. The link is in the chat right now, kings and queens. The link is in the chat right about now, so feel free to do that. And I look forward to seeing you all as you all come through. For those who are not here at the beginning, I am wearing my red, black, and green sash because today is the 80th anniversary of the passing of the most eminent prophet, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And it just so happens that I am delivering this presentation entitled Ancestors and the Forces of Nature on this particular day of the 80th anniversary of the passing of the prophet. And so the prophet said, look for me in the whirlwind and the storm. Look for me all around you. And so the whirlwind and the storm are forces of nature. And so an hour before coming live, I was really struck by that what's the word? Harmony, yes, with the time, with the now that we are dealing with. And so yeah, man, it was necessary to come and just represent Mosiah in this, the 100th anniversary this year, which is the 100th anniversary of the International Convention of the African Peoples of the World. And this flag that I'm wearing across my chest at the moment is actually 100 years old from that 1920, the month of Mosiah, formerly known as August. And so we give thanks to everyone for being here. Now, the link is in the chat, kings and queens, so do feel free to come through. If anybody has a question, a comment, a correction, a challenge, I welcome it all. I welcome it all right here and right now. I do want to, a question was asked of me earlier about Punt. And so, yeah, Punt, from my understanding, is in the area of the Horn and East Africa. So Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Eritrea, etc. And I am made to understand that their ancestors, our ancient Kemetu ancestors, called Punt the land of the gods, yeah, because many of the deities that we find in the Nile Valley were derived from the cultures south of Kemet, yeah, from Kush to Puntland and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's a divine and deep connection between Kemet and Punt and Kush, and this is why when we're dealing with Nile Valley, we speak of Nile Valley civilization. We don't isolate Kemet outside of the rest of the Nile Valley. That's a folly. You know what I'm saying? And so we affirm those connections. Greetings, my brothers M.A. and Witness.
Good evening, M.A. Brown. Good evening, Shakara. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I don't want to waste too much of the time. You might have mentioned it already.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask, with the libation going all the way back to Kemet, you were talking about it and you showed pictures, hieroglyphs about it.
Mm-hmm.
What was the actual liquid that they used?
That's a good question. My understanding is that it was water. Yeah. Now in the book he goes in a bit more, and so I should say first and foremost that the oldest known monument, yeah, from ancient Kush, is a vase, and the vase itself depicts libation. Yeah. So this is prior to Kemet. Okay. So the idea is that that libation is a very old ritual. Okay. But I believe that the most common liquid used in Kemet was water. Yes. And I would definitely do more specific research on that and probably answer that more fully next week.
Would you know, is in the 21st century or the 20th century, do they they use alcohol sometimes, and I've always wondered, would their ancestors be unhappy if water or something else was being used instead of alcohol?
Okay, so there's two things there. The first thing is that it is my understanding that certain forms of alcohol would have always been used. The priest, ritually speaking, water is considered to be neutral. And so when you're looking to activate something, you wouldn't use a neutral liquid. Yeah. So it depends on what ritual is being performed. Okay. That would dictate the liquid that is being used. Yeah. And so spirits are considered to be activators, yeah, of energy. That is why spirits are sometimes used. At the same time, there is, I think, there is just reason to suggest that there is some colonial influence, particularly in the types of alcohols that are being used nowadays, if that makes sense. And so, but also it's worth noting that when you're giving, outside of general libation, when you're giving offerings to ancestors or divinities, you would generally speaking seek advice and be following the instructions of a babalawo or whatever the priestly tradition is referred to in your specific your specific tradition, if that makes sense. So beyond a certain point, like, you don't just arbitrarily give offerings, yeah? You would be giving offerings based upon guidance in that regard. And I hope that answers the question.
Thanks very much. That was all I wanted to know.
I can also add, though, that in my father, in his development, when he was being taught about libation, he was taught about a Southern African tradition. I believe it's in Zimbabwe, whereby the people mix a sweet herb with a bitter herb, yeah, and that represents balance. And that is infused into water, and that is what's used for libation. So different things can be used depending on what the ritual is, what the tradition is, and so on.
Thank you very much for your time, and have a good day. Thanks.
Good facts, Robert. Good facts. Always to the point. Brother Ebe?
Yes, Brother Shakara. Good evening, man.
Give thanks. Good evening. Good to see you, bro.
All right. I've been in and out. My connection has been funny the last couple of days, but yeah, I just wanted to ask a question on libation. Is it me echoing or is it you? One sec.
I'm not sure. 1 second. See if you're still echoing now. Are you still echoing?
No. I'm not sure. Anyway, let me just go ahead anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, libation. I put a little comment in the chat. I've always found it very strange to observe people pour libation in all different types of locations. Sometimes indoors, sometimes 6 floors up in a particular whatever. I've always wondered the validity of that practice when it's outside of a natural context, when it's not hitting the ground. That is something I can always. Well, I instantly resonated with the idea that it's almost like a sacrifice as well. We drink water, you know what I'm saying? So for it to hit the ground and nourish the ground, and we have ancestors and loved ones in the ground. I can go to the cemetery and pour that on my brother's grave. You understand? So yeah, I wonder what your opinion is on the validity, not even validity, but whether the practice has strayed somewhat. And whether the whole point of it is for it to hit you.
So there's levels to the thing. Let's put it that way. Essentially, the primary agent of the libation is the people themselves, and the person who performs the libation and whatever is used for the libation is functional of the people themselves. Yeah. So it can be argued that the people themselves are primary. As long as the people's intention is clear, then the libation is valid. Yeah. However, I do take your point. When I was young, coming up in the Pan-African community, it was, you always poured libation into a plant. Yeah. because the soil is present in the building. So it means that wherever you are, you could be 100 stories up, that the soil is still the soil. Yeah. So you always pour it into a plant. Then now I've seen situations where it's just poured on the ground, like it could be a carpet or any kind of floor. And I've always been slightly about that. Yeah. Again, but understanding that the people are the primary agent, I still, you know what I'm saying? And then there's levels as well. So if you're just like, if you're opening a meeting and you're pouring a libation, to open the meeting and call the ancestors, it's less dire as it would be in other ceremonies, if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, because that libation or acknowledging the ancestors can be something as simple as you've got a family dinner and you leave a plate, for the ancestors, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? That act in and of itself is an act of communion with the ancestors. So I would say that it depends on the circumstances, from my understanding, at least at this stage of my development. It depends on the circumstances that we are in. However, there is something about the plant business and soil that I am particularly passionate about. So I'd harmonize with you on that front.
Yeah, man. All right, give thanks, man.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's a slower day today, Kings and Queens. So but the link is in the chat. Anybody who wants to ask a question or has something to say, raise a challenge, raise a point, add to the knowledge, the information, correct anything that I have said that you feel needs to be addressed, then feel free to do so. But it looks like I'll be logging off earlier today than I have been. And we're not complaining about that. I want to give thanks as well to the ancestors and the creator of the universe, because I was at my brother's house today. My brother just had, and his queen just had a baby a couple of days ago. And so I was able to go see my new nephew today. And so we give thanks for that, for life, you know what I'm saying? For the return, the recycling of our ancestral energy into our family line. Ashe, and we give thanks, you know what I'm saying? So be like my brother and my sister-in-law, Jade, and Ike, and the new life. We don't call our prince's name until he has had a naming ceremony or be properly blessed. So you know what I mean? Give thanks. So I'll be here for another 5 minutes. If nobody else comes through in the next 5 minutes, we're gonna log off. But once again, give thanks for everybody joining us through this series. I do hope ones and ones are getting something from it. I certainly am. I'm not gonna lie. After burying Auntie and Ketchy, this thing was just on my head, and I knew I just had to do it, so I did it. I've been delaying it for a while because you have to properly research and develop, and make sure that you're coming with correct information. But I knew this had to be done, and so we're here. But I think what it is that man had to start the thing, because at each point that I'm doing this, there's more to say and there's more to develop on. There's more research to do. There's more in-depth understandings to develop with regards to all these things. Yeah, and so I am humbled by the process of going through this work, and I thank you all for trusting me enough to listen, at least. You know what I mean, to what is being said. And I do hope that ones and ones are actually getting something from what is being said. Next week, we will be delving into the self, spirit, and nationhood. It's going to be my favorite one in the series, I'm sure, because of that focus on nationhood. And so I'm really going to be focusing on the practical applications that African spirituality has, for today's world, the practical applications that African spirituality has in today's world, and how we can use it as African people in our own spiritual, individual and collective development. So that's where I want to go with the thing, because Brother Dalian Adofo makes a good point where he says that he doesn't like the term traditional African religion, because the term traditional gives the impression that it's for a time past and not applicable to today. And so that's why we talk about KIMOYO. So we talk about African spirituality. So we talk about African spiritual systems, because we are conduits of the development and evolution of our culture and our spirituality. All right. So, giving thanks once again for everyone coming. Let me see if I can find this particular quote. I didn't put it in the presentation, but I did note it down from the book Libations, and maybe this will answer a couple of the questions that were just asked. So bear with me, families. Let me see. Bear with me, kings and queens. You can still come through if you wish. No, I'm going to pass it. Okay. Right. This says, so reading from now the book Libations by Kimani Nehusi, he says, there is a great likelihood that this cultural complex was extant before the crystal incense burner. So I said vase. That's what I was referring to, the crystal incense burner, not vase. Excuse me, kings and queens. Or even the Nabta ceremonial complex, which has been dated to 11,000 years ago. Yeah, that's 9,000 BC. See chapter 2. Both of which predated the establishment of the unified state, Kemet. But there is much certainty that it can be accounted for from Kemet to the present on the African continent and in African communities abroad, an attested history of well over 5,000 years. Like much else in African culture, the offering complex is both transgenerational and transcontinental. This complex is an aspect of that spirituality that permeates the time-space correlation of African existence. It is here that we find the tremendous feat of the generations in continuously passing on to succeeding generations for more than 5,000 years. That which was inherited even through the savage times of the last 2,000 years of disruption by the Persians, Greeks, and Arabs, and 500 years of continuing Arab and European disruption. It is here too, in African cultural transmission across times and space, that we find a potent source of African redemption, and we find some of the best potential foundations for African unity, yeah, which is the point that I was just finishing off on just a while ago. Okay, so I hope ones and ones understand that. All right, kings and queens, we're going to wrap up here. So give thanks once again for joining I, and we look forward to seeing you next week when we deal with ritual, the self, and nationhood. Ritual, the self, and nationhood. Tenda Mwari, be thankful unto the Most High, Mother, Father, Creator of the universe. Give praises unto our great ancestors. African power for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.